On this episode of Crime Scenes with Coffee Beans, join me as I discuss the heartbreaking case of Sian Kingi, who was riding home after meeting with her mother and crossed paths with two absolute psychopaths. Coming up right after this. Hello, everybody. Welcome to the podcast. Welcome to Crime Scenes with Coffee Beans. I'm your host, Belinda Brady, and welcome, guys. Welcome to my little podcast where I talk about true Australian murders while I am drinking coffee. And for those of you who are my regular listeners, welcome back. And for those of you who have just started to join us, welcome. Thank you. And as usual, I will start with what I'm drinking. I normally drink coffee. 9 times out of 10, I'll drink coffee. And as autumn is settling in Australia, even though summer is still clinging on for dear life, like we've had some really hot days and nights, I've managed to get myself some pumpkin spice latte syrup. And this one's actually really nice. You know how some of them can be a bit on the sour side. This one's really sweet, so it's lovely. It's very fitting for this brisk autumn day that I find myself recording this episode on. And you'll also notice that I have a new logo for the podcast. I absolutely love it. I thought, time for a bit of a change, and I reached out to my dear friend at Grim Poppy Designs, fabulous Christine, and she did an amazing job. I could not be happier with it. So if you have any artwork you want designed, if you want that personal touch, give her a yell, send her a message. She is amazing. You can find her on all the socials. Now, let me do a shout out to you, my beautiful listeners. Where are you listening to me from? So normally I'll go the top 3 countries. I haven't done that for a bit, but I will. And number 1's Australia, number 2 is New Zealand, and number 3 is the US. That really hasn't changed. But coming in at number 4, we have the UK, and just behind them is Vietnam. It's awesome. I love seeing that. And I've also got people listening to me from France, from Pakistan, Colombia, and Mexico. And that is just, I love that. That is so awesome. Thank you, guys. Thank you so much for tuning in and listening. And you can subscribe to me. If you do subscribe, you get bonus ghost episodes. If you think our criminals are nasty, wait until you meet our ghosts. My God. And there is so much of Haunted Australia that I am yet to discover as well, despite being born and bred here, and I would love to discover it with you guys. So come on, let's do it. Subscribe and let's listen to some ghost stories together. And you can also buy me a coffee. You can also find me on TikTok. You can also send me fan mail. You can send me a text. There are lots of ways to get in touch with me. And if you're interested in becoming a sponsor, absolutely feel free to reach out. If you're a coffee company, syrup company, whatever you like, I'm all ears. Let's have a chat. Okay, guys. So this episode I've titled "Today is the Day: The Murder of Sian Kingi," and I will give you a trigger warning. This one discusses the murder and rape of a 12-year-old schoolgirl. It was a horrible crime. It is a horrible crime, and the people who committed this act don't deserve to have their crime covered up because of how sensitive it is. It needs to be out there so no one ever forgets what these two revolting people did to a young girl. So trigger warning is advised if that is upsetting for you. My sources for this episode: nzherald.co.nz, news.com.au, trove.nla.gov.au, abcnet.au, and statestories.com. And again, I will give you guys a trigger warning. Please be aware this episode is very disturbing, but we are going to talk about it. So listener discretion is advised. So let's get into it, guys. Today is the day, the murder of Sian Kingi. Now, every now and then, we hear of a couple that get together and they are so perfect, so absolutely perfect, perfectly made for each other. You can't help but smile. You know, they finish each other's sentences. They have the same goals in life. They have the same dreams. But then on the other side of the coin, you hear of two people who meet, and these two people are so vile, so evil, so unbelievably grotesque. You actually can't believe that fate has somehow let these two sickos cross paths and become a team. Like, isn't it bad enough that there's one sick son of a bitch out there? Why is he meeting another one who shares his or her sick, fucked up desires? Like, it's just mind-boggling to me. And yes, I am talking about killer couples. That rarity, it is rare, but it's not rare enough. And when these two people do meet, they find out that they like the same fucked up things as the other person, like rape or murder or both. And this is the case of the couple I'm going to talk about. And unfortunately for a young girl doing nothing more than riding her push bike home, she crossed paths with them when they were ready to make their sick fantasy a reality. Sian Kingi was born on the 16th of December 1974 to parents Barrie and Belinda Kingi. Now, she was born in Australia, but she had Maori descent. I believe she got that from her father. And her family lived in Queensland's Noosa Heads. And Noosa Heads is a beautiful part of Queensland. And that is where she attended Sunshine Beach State High School. Now, Sian was a tall girl with long blonde hair and dark, striking eyes, blue eyes. And she was known for two things: her love of sport. She particularly liked netball and cycling, and her beautiful smile. A smile that would absolutely light up a room. And Sian was really popular among her peers. She was well liked. She was a really sweet and kind and caring girl. I think you'd be hard pressed to find anyone who didn't like this girl. And her mum and dad loved her. They adored their daughter, and she adored them. And on the afternoon of the 27th of November 1987, Sian met her mother Linda at Noosa Fair Shopping Centre to buy fabric for a party dress she had planned to wear to a friend's upcoming birthday party. Now, Sian and her mum wrapped things up at around 4:30 p.m. and as Sian had ridden her bike to school that morning and then rode her bike to the shopping centre to meet her mum, Sian told her mum she'd ride her bike home. So mum was walking one way and Sian was crossing through the park, as she always did. So mum walked around the park and Sian rode her bike through it. Now, as Sian took off on her yellow push bike, she called out to her mum as she pedalled away, "See you at home, mum." Now, Mum Linda arrived at the family home first, and when Sian didn't follow soon after, she didn't think anything of it. She thought maybe, she'd caught up with some friends or bumped into some friends, but as the minutes ticked into hours, she felt the first pangs of unease. She should be home by now. Sian wasn't the kind of kid who took off for hours at a time and didn't come back. So she tried to brush off her worries that maybe she had really been just caught up with some friends and was taking her time getting home. So when the hours ticked by, she started calling Sian's friends to see if they'd seen her, but she had no luck. And when Sian's dad, Barrie, arrived home from work that day at around 8 p.m, they both set out to look for her. So they took the same path that Sian took that day trying to find her. And when they arrived at Pinaroo Park, which is where Sian would have ridden her bike through, they shone their car's headlights into the grass and they both saw something that made their hearts stop. Sian's yellow bike lying in the grass. There was no sign of Sian. They knew she would never leave it there on purpose. She would not have done that. So they grabbed her bike, loaded it into their car and drove straight to Noosa police station, where they told police their daughter was missing. Now, the police responded immediately and they put out an alert so Sian's photo could appear on the front page of the next day's newspapers. A team of 6 homicide detectives were assembled and newspapers ran urgent appeals for any information on Sian's disappearance. There was widespread hope she would be found alive and well, and locals and those just passing through the area joined in searching for her. This lasted 6 days. Everyone was looking for this poor girl for 6 days until the unthinkable became a reality. On the 3rd of December 1987, a fruit picker working near Castaway Creek in the Tinbiwa Mountain State Forest, which is now called Tewantin National Park, noticed a foul smell. He went to investigate, and there, in a dry creek bed, he found Sian still in her school uniform. She was approximately 15 kilometres from Pinaroo Park, where she was last seen riding her bike. Whoever had dumped her there had chosen this spot on purpose. The road was concealed by trees lining the road, but it was close enough that she would have been discovered eventually. The road was just 150 feet away, and a service station, also known as a gas station, was just up the road. She had been murdered with people around, but no one had seen or heard anything. Sian had been raped and stabbed 12 times. 3 of her wounds had gone through her heart and her throat had been cut. Detective Bob Dallow, who led the investigation, would later say of the discovery of Sian, "When we found Sian, she had her shoes on and her pink socks, and I'll remember that for as long as I live. I think about that every day." Sian's parents were heartbroken. The community, the Noosa community and the country, Australia, shared their grief and outrage, and now the missing persons case had turned into a race against time to catch whoever had done this to Sian before they do it again. And though the police had pulled little evidence from the crime scene, remember it was the late 80s, DNA wasn't a really big thing. They had plenty of witnesses of two sus people getting around the area. Now, many people reported seeing a white 1973 Holden Kingswood station wagon with interstate registration plates near Pinaroo Park after Sian went missing. Now, the driver and the passenger of this car made someone feel that uneasy. They even took note of the registration plates, and the registration plates were Victorian. Victoria is another state in Australia, and the Victorian plates were checked. The rego number was LLE 429, and it came back to being registered to a woman named Valmae Beck. And this car, along with her sus passenger, was already on the police radar. 16 days before Sian was murdered, a woman called Cheryl Mortimer was driving home from work. I believe she worked in Target, when a female passenger in a parked car flagged her down. Now, Cheryl pulled over. She assumed the woman needed help or she needed directions. And when she stopped her car, a man suddenly appeared at her window with a knife and lunged at Cheryl. But Cheryl fought back, and she fought back hard enough that the man actually cut his hand on his own knife and took off. And he jumped in the car with the female passenger, and they drove off. Cheryl floored it and took off. She went to the police station and she reported this attack to the police, where she gave them a description of the car and her attacker. And this car had been linked to at least 3 other assaults or attempted assaults in the area in the weeks prior. Now, the registered owner of this car, Valmae Beck, was married, and she was married to a man named Barrie Watts. And her husband, Barrie Watts, and her were wanted in Western Australia for breach of parole. And both had extensive criminal records. Now, Western Australia is on the other side of the country. So you've got Queensland on the eastern side and you've got Western Australia on the western side, hence it being called Western Australia. They couldn't be further apart if you tried. So they've skipped bail and literally crossed the country to get away. Now, Detective Bob Atkinson and his colleagues tracked down the pair within days. And it turns out they had fled to the New South Wales Central Coast town of the Entrance. They fled as soon as Sian's body was found, and the couple paid their rent using their names on a money order. So the police have said we're after Valmae and Barrie. These two idiots have paid their rent via money order using their proper names, and the landlord has tipped off the police saying, hey, they're here. Now, plainclothed police swooped in and arrested the couple on the 12th of December, and they were extradited back to Queensland on the 14th of December. Now, on the 15th of December, Barrie Watts and Valmae Beck were charged with the abduction, rape and murder of Sian Kingi. Barrie refused to speak, wouldn't say a thing, but Valmae was more talkative. And when they were in a holding cell, police managed to record conversations between the couple, and they were able to piece together what had happened. Now, Barrie was 10 years younger than Valmae, and Valmae was a overweight, middle-aged frump of a woman. She was not attractive, and I'm going to say it. I normally wouldn't beat down on a woman's appearance, but I'm going to with her. And Barrie was 10 years younger than her, and he was very vocal about wanting a younger woman. So on top of what little she had to offer him in the looks department, he was very vocal about him wanting to be with a younger woman. So she just went along with everything. She probably enjoyed it as well. Now, he told her he fantasized about raping a young virgin because he would be her first and her last. And this couple, this vile couple, is very, very similar in their motives and their sick fantasies, like another couple that murdered women, raped and murdered women, who also hailed from Western Australia, David and Catherine Burney. Now, I've done an episode on these guys, and they are just as fucked up as these two, if not more. And the horrible crimes these two committed were all done to satisfy David's sick, fucked up sexual fantasies, just like Barrie's. If you're interested, jump on and have a listen. It's a mind-boggling crime, it really is. Now, through these recordings, I don't know if they realised they were being recorded or if they were just stupid, but through these recordings, police found out exactly what happened to Sian that day. Now, Sian bid her mother farewell, as we know, and started riding her bike through the park. There she came across Valmae, who was distraught and apparently looking for her dog, a white poodle wearing a pink bow. Now, Sian, being the kind girl and animal lover she was, offered to help, only too happy to help. And when she got off her bike, Barrie appeared behind her, grabbed her and threw her into the couple's white station wagon. He taped her hands and mouth together and drove to Tinbiwa Forest, where he repeatedly raped the 12-year-old and then stabbed her 12 times in the chest before cutting her throat. They dumped her body near the road, and then they went home to watch TV like nothing happened. Barrie told his wife that night that he'd like to do that again. So before I go any further, just who were Valmae Beck and Barrie Watts? Who were these two fucked up individuals? Now, Valmae Faye Beck was born in 1943 and was the youngest of 4 children. By the time she was 12, she worked in a clothing factory, and by 15, she had been made a ward of the state after neglect from both her parents. She spent a good chunk of 1961 to 1972 in and out of jail, married a few times, and had 6 kids, all of which did not live with her. Now, her crimes of choice were theft, indecent behaviour, robbery, and vagrancy. And during a stint in jail, she became close with Catherine Barrie, who I mentioned earlier, who committed similar crimes with her husband David. And who knows if she listened to those stories that Catherine would tell and go, I'd love to do that myself. Who knows? But she would end up mirroring Catherine's crimes. Now, she met Barrie Watts when he was released from jail in 1983, and the couple married in 1986. Now, I believe they met at a Perth tavern where Barrie was working as a doorman after his release. Now, Barrie Watts was 10 years younger than Beck, and he was born in 1953. He was an orphan and a ward of the state, and his crimes of choice included assault and threatening previous partners. Now, after Barrie was in jail after he was jailed in 1984 for break and enter, he was released in 1986, so he spent a few years in jail, where he promised Valmae he was on the straight and narrow. Now, he may have been younger than her, significantly younger than her, but he was the dominant one. He was in charge. And they got married in 1986, and Valmae, desperate to keep her husband by her side, was, I guess, happy to go along with his plans, or I dare say she enjoyed it herself. Now, in 1987, they are charged with stealing and fraud offences, and they skip bail, where they flee to Queensland. Now, amongst all this, Barrie Watts was tried for the murder of Helen Mary Feeney. Now, Helen Mary Feeney was a 31-year-old mother and a teaching student, and she went missing on the 29th of October 1987 in Brisbane, just a month before Sian was murdered. Now, Barrie was tried for this. He was tried for this, and he was acquitted. There was insufficient evidence, and he was acquitted, so he walked free. Not long after, they are charged with stealing and fraud offences, and the couple skipped bail, where Valmae and Barrie flee to Queensland. And I need to say here too, the body of Helen Feeney has never been found. Her car was found. Her white Holden Gemini sedan was found abandoned, and the driver's window was smashed. She still hasn't been found, guys. But I'll talk about that I'll talk more about that later on. Now, when they arrived in Queensland, just before they kidnapped and murdered Sian, and presumably after they murdered Helen Feeney, which I have no doubt those two were involved in it, Valmae rang a friend in Perth and confided down the phone that Barrie was at it again. He was going down to the school bus stop just down the road and was perving at the schoolgirls. And on the 10th of November 1987, this time they attempt to kidnap a nurse on the guise of asking for directions, but a male nurse interrupts them and they flee. During this time, Barrie apparently showed Valmae graves he had dug for, quote, Ipswich girls he tried to kidnap and murder. The nurse and the target employee, the one who managed to make him cut his hand, were two of those girls. Now they're in jail for the murder of Sian, knowing that he had been acquitted for the murder of Helen Feeney. The detectives were absolutely determined he was not going to get away a second time. So, as I mentioned before, they recorded conversations between the couple, and they also had an undercover cop who was wired living in the cell with Barrie Watts, pretending to be a new inmate. Now, this detective, Matthew Harry, lived in Barrie's cell for weeks, posing as a new cellmate, and gathered all the information the prosecution needed to convict. Barrie was, happy to brag about his crime. The detective said of the experience, your basic instinct is to break their necks, but you can't. You never forget their faces. You work together to get the result, to get them off the street and to make sure this doesn't happen again. As the couple was transported to the courthouse, locals were there in droves, throwing rocks at the couple and calling for them to be hanged. Valmae Beck pled not guilty to murder but guilty to kidnap, and Barrie Watts pled not guilty to all charges. The couple was tried separately, and Valmae Beck's trial commenced in 1988, and on the 20th of October 1988 she was found guilty and given life in prison. She told the court that Sian never cried, never shed a tear. She was a brave little girl. She never uttered a peep. She just did everything he told her. Justice Jack Kelly called her a callous and depraved woman, telling her no decent person could not feel revulsion at what you did, a woman with children of your own. Barrie Watts stuck to his his not guilty plea, and in December of 1990 he was found guilty of all charges, and he too was sentenced to life. Again, Justice Kelly was scathing and said Watts should never be released from prison, or he should never be released on parole if he was of an age where he could not cause menace to young girls. In my opinion, he should not be released ever. Now, the day Sian was murdered, Barrie saw her riding her yellow bike through the park and apparently turned to his wife and whispered, "Today's the day." But it would take Barrie Watts a decade to finally admit to the murder and rape of Sian Kingi, even though he spoke about it with his wife. He spoke about it with the undercover cop who posed as a new inmate in his cell. It would take him a decade to publicly admit it, even though we know it was him. Now, Barrie apparently had no problem bragging about the murder of Helen Feeney, however. No problems there. And he told at least five inmates he was in jail with, that she was pushing up daisies at Bold Hills, not far from where she had been kidnapped. He also told another inmate in a recorded conversation that he dumped her body in a rubbish tip. Now, Barrie apparently bragged about several other murders to other inmates, but he was only charged with the murder of Sian Kingi. He was again charged with the murder of Helen Feeney. He was charged with her murder in 1995, but he was again acquitted. Now, in May of 2008, Valmae Beck, who changed her name to Faye Cram, was admitted to hospital after complaining of shortness of breath. She underwent surgery and was placed in a coma, and detectives were at her bedside in case she had any, deathbed confessions of other murders or where the location of Helen Feeney's body was. But she didn't say anything. She didn't regain consciousness, and she died without giving anything up. Barrie Watts, who, when asked by police, "When did murder come into your life?" answered simply, "I don't know," is still in jail and has been denied parole several times. His last parole attempt in 2024 was knocked back, and the parole board said he is too great a risk to the public if he is released. He won't be able to apply for parole for another 10 years. And when he is able to apply for parole in 10 years, he will be the age of 80. This is thanks to a new law called Sian's Law, which was passed in Queensland in 2021. And it is designed to keep child killers and serial killers behind bars for longer by restricting their access to parole applications and stopping the victims' families having to be traumatized every single time this person applies for parole. Sian's family were the driving force behind this law. Parliamentarians, our members of parliament, supported it, and over 72,000 people signed the petition to get it going. Not surprisingly, Barrie Watts and Valmae Beck are suspected of being involved in other murders and other disappearances, but unless Barrie has a change of heart or we find some concrete evidence, I guess we'll never know. Barrie Watts is still in jail, and I, for one, hope he rots in there, and I hope he doesn't see the outside of a jail cell for the rest of his natural life. I wish Sian's family all the love and happiness in the world, and I hope that her memory is a blessing. And that's it, guys. A case of two psychos meeting up, and whether one was more dominant than the other, or whether one wanted to fulfill her husband's fucked up fantasies. At what point do you watch what your husband's doing to a 12-year-old child and just sit back and let that happen? She's just as bad as he is, but she's now dead. So I'm not going to waste any more energy on her. If anyone does know anything about the whereabouts of Helen Feeney or any other murders or disappearances that these two are suspected of being involved in, please let local authorities know, and hopefully we can help some other families lay their loved ones to rest or finally get some answers. And that's it, guys. Another episode of Crime Scene with Coffee Beans done and dusted. Thank you so much for your company. I hope you've enjoyed this podcast as much as I enjoy putting it together for you. But as always, thank you for listening, and thank you for your company. You're all rock stars. And until next time, guys, stay safe, stay cool, and stay caffeinated. I'll catch you all later.